When we get a Patreon going, that's the exclusive content right there. That's what that is.
We'll bring back the casting couch.
Oh yeah, it's gonna be right there. Yeah.
Welcome back to the Casting Cost cEDH podcast. I'm Blake.
And I'm Chase, and today we're going to finish up the last bit of our top 10 cEDH commanders.
We're so fucking awkward, dude.
I know. Hey, it's okay. Dude, if that's the most awkward part of the whole thing, I'll take it. I'll take it. It's just going to get better every time.
Hell yeah.
It's like a fine wine.
Yeah.
God, this whole thing got me fucked up today.
It's bad.
Yeah.
That's how I felt last week, dude. I felt like shit. And it's probably good that we did turn the table long ways because I would have probably gave you whatever I had.
Well, it depends on what you're trying to give me.
Patreon content.
All right. So last week we did the bottom half of our top 10 of what we saw on EDH top 16 based on popularity, all commanders, all tournaments within the past month. And I guess before we get into the last bit of it, because the top 5 didn't change, but since the last time we recorded, some of those rankings have moved around. So previously we had Najeela at 10. I believe that it was Tivit at 9. We talked a lot about Yuriko. Sorry. We had Najeela at 10, Magda at 9, Tivit at 8, and then Yuriko at 7, Rog Thras at 6. Yes. And since then, it looks like Tivit's moved up. Rog Thras has stayed at 6, Tivit is at 7. Looks like Magda has moved up. We're at 8 now. Yuriko, they must have really heard what we talked about last week and shifted Yuriko down the list, and then Najeela has actually been taken off.
When you didn't say Yuriko, I just kept hoping. I was like, off the list.
And so Najeela's actually been replaced by Derevi.
That's crazy. Dude, that's insane to think about when you... That's just, I don't know. I'm just thinking that's kind of crazy to think that a 3-color deck just basically knocked a 5-color deck out of the top 10. Do we even have, we have one 5-color deck, I think. There's no 5-color deck in the bottom 5, or is there?
Not in the bottom 5. There will be one that we're going to talk about today in the top.
Isn't that crazy?
But Najeela was the only one. And actually, even though Najeela got knocked down to 11th, the one in 12th following that is Kenrith.
Really?
So we got 2 5-colors that are almost right there, kind of creeping into the top 10, but we only got one. And I could probably spend hours talking about her, but we're not going to do that today. We will talk about her, but we'll get there when we get there. But yeah, Derevi, I think I said last time, I think Derevi is going to be a deck that makes its way into the top 10 soon. Any deck that can really abuse that ETB, especially playing the One Ring, the mill line is very I'm not gonna say easy, but it is really hard to interact with. Having Derevi in your command zone plus a mill and then Gaia's Cradle and be able to do all these shenanigans, even if you can't formulate a win right then and there, well, you can untap all your stuff going into someone else's turn, do the same thing, tap down all their permanents and go around the table kind of policing and bullying things to where, it's kind of like Tivit in a way. If people can't stop that combo, even if you don't have the definitive win right then and there, you're going to be able to lock down the table until you do present that win. So, I think that's... I think that it's just a strong deck. Being able to get around some of the things in the format with that activated ability of pay 4 and just put Derevi into play, gets around commander tax, gets around a lot of things. It's versatile like Yuriko in that way.
No, I was honestly just thinking, like, does Emil say that, like, you have to blink other creatures? Do you have to...
That you control.
So it's just creatures you control?
Yes.
Can he blink himself? Or can she? Whatever.
I think it's other.
Other?
I believe it is other.
Okay. I wasn't sure. Because I was just thinking, like, that would be a ridiculous control list. Because you do get to respond in the upkeep. So you could just tap all their stuff down and just play that game the entire time.
Yeah.
Just
absolutely
keep them locked down. And then if they try to, like, in their upkeep, you know, they get priority for a second. Like, if they try to hit you with a removal spell, then you just blink your own stuff. And it's like, well, fizzles.
Right.
You know, that's crazy, dude. That's so good. I didn't even think of that.
So, I mean, it's a solid deck. One that I think I've said before, I'm kind of interested in, like, picking up and trying to play this year. I feel like the Bant, like, as far as a 3-color deck, I feel like it's strong. It's just not to the same level as probably the first deck that we're going to be talking about today in our Grixis color pile. Deck that I'm trying to play a little bit here and there, and I know that you don't care for all that much.
Yeah.
You already know what it is.
Yeah. Rockstar go fast.
Yeah, that's pretty much how that deck plays out. I don't even know if we need to talk about it beyond that point.
Talladega Nights of a deck, you know. Ricky Bobby dot deck.
Oh my God. So at number 5 currently, and actually this is one that moved down 2 since the last time I looked at the list. And so at number 5 we have Rograk and Silas. Our Grixis color pile that just goes fast.
People need to start paying me to talk positively about their decks, because when I shit talk a deck, it moves. Like, I shit talk Rog, I shit talk Yuriko, and they both dropped. And then I was sweet talking Sisse, like saying sweet nothings, and she jumped up. I was praising Tibbet, he jumped up.
Oh, so what are your thoughts on this deck? I know that it's not one you necessarily care for all that much.
I mean, I think it's don't get me wrong, I think it's a good list. I think the problem that I have with Rogsai is, I'm trying to think of, like, how to say this. It feels like playing the lottery. Like, you have enough people playing the lottery that eventually, yes, somebody's gonna win. So I feel like that's kind of what happens at tournaments. Like, you just have somebody that gets, like, you know, they obviously know how to play the deck. I'm not saying that they're bad players by any means, but they just get on this, like, streak, and they're just knocking it out. Like, you know, it's like, okay, good hand, good hand, good hand, good hand, or good mulligans, whatever. And you have enough people doing that ROG has a lot of representation. It does good, like, at top 16s tournaments. You know, it's going to win some tournaments. It was the thing that literally, I mean, dominated the Top Deck Invitational. But I just think that I don't like the deck personally, because I think that it, especially if you're like a new Magic player and you get into the game, it just teaches you to be, like, very irresponsible in the game. And if you don't, even, like, you can be irresponsible and, you know, still, like, do okay, but there's still skill to it. You got to know what you're doing. And I mean, we've seen that with people that have tried to play it. Like, if you don't understand what you're doing in that Grixis color pie, I feel like it can really get you in trouble. Whereas, you know, obviously it would make sense that if you're new to the game and you just wrap the game up super quick, it's like, well, it gives me less opportunities to make mistakes.
Right.
But it's not, I don't even think that that's necessarily the case. You're just taking a similar amount of game actions, just condensed into a much smaller window. And I feel like there's a lot of opportunity for things to go wrong there. Now, again, solid deck. I think it's great. I mean, it wouldn't be this high up if it wasn't great. But I just think I don't know if the deck is necessarily that good, or if Grixis is just good. I really don't know. I don't think it's as good as what the data is actually saying it is. I really do think it's just one of those decks that's kind of like up to chance. Because, I mean, do we really have, like, I may need to look into it a little more, but do we have pilots that are like, I know back in the Invitational, like, we had pilots that were consistently doing well with the deck, but do we still have pilots that are, like, consistently doing well with the deck? Or is it kind of sporadic on, like, who's winning these tournaments? Like, you know what I mean? Like, they had a really good run in this tournament, but then they didn't really have a good run in this tournament. Like, what, you know what I mean? Yeah,
no, I get that. I think it's really kind of hard to gauge, because I think part of that is going to be like, you know, where in our last several videos we kind of talked, like, kind of go back to the bands and things like that. Like, just as much as Kennen was a deck, I feel like people jumped on post-ban, and we see the numbers are really split there because there's a lot of people playing that deck, but then not a lot of people topping events for that deck. I think we kind of have a similar like kind of problem here with the Rogsai, where people jumped into it going, oh, this deck is really fast and I like playing that really aggressive style. And then they kind of get caught in this loop where it's just like, oh, I'm not doing as well with it as I thought it was, or it's not what I really thought it was, because it's not a deck that can pilot itself. You have to know what you're doing in the deck. You have to know your lines. You have to know what you're going for. You have to be, not just play pattern wise aggressive with this, but like strategically when you're going through and you're doing your mulligans, like, I've tried playing Rogsai a little bit, and the way I kind of look at things, if I can slam down like a few rocks, get either a will effect or a value engine going, and then like maybe a piece of interaction or something, I feel like I'm in a good spot with it. Or like a tutor. Like I think Rogsai is one of those decks where it's honestly, it might not even be player to player, it just might be tournament to tournament. Where the meta is slowed down quite a bit. Even I've kind of fallen in this mindset where, I'm not going to hold hands that have as much interaction. If you go to an event and you have all like a Rogsai player going and sitting at all these tables where, maybe people are kind of going into the same mindset, oh, this game is going to grind out. Like I'm going to try to set up some value pieces or try to advance my board state and go from turn 2 to turn 5 or 6, that quickly. I might keep a bunch of dorks, rocks, heuristic study, things like that, and not be prepared for Rogsai going off. And I think that's what kind of sets it apart. Like, whenever it comes to players, like if a really confident Rogsai player goes in and they see how their table is and they are aggressive with their mulligans, I think they're going to take that away. Like, I think they're just going to run away with the game. And then they might, it might not happen at the next table, but I think that's what this deck kind of comes down to. I know you said like playing the lottery. Well, I don't know if I necessarily compare it to that, but like, if you go to Vegas and someone knows how to like count cards or like things like that, or can take advantage of whatever the table is doing, or even in like, poker games, like being able to bluff and like things like that. I feel like the really confident players in that setting is how like really good Rogsai pilots are, where they can bluff, they can pull out all those kind of tricks that are not just part of the sitting there and playing the game. And I think that's what you kind of have to know and be able to do to play that deck, not just like, oh, these cards do this, if that makes sense.
No, and I get what you're saying. I think that the issue that ROG is probably running into is because a lot of people have given it a reputation, I guess, like, obviously like Dylan from Play to Win, he's played the deck quite a bit. Lamora's cards, like that was his deck that he was on. Like he loved jamming that deck. And then obviously it was doing really, really well. So it just kind of developed this reputation. And honestly now, I mean, when you see somebody sit down at a table and they're piloting Rogsai, I feel like people immediately kind of turn their attention to them. Now, obviously for that to happen, you're going to need somebody that's kind of like seasoned and like they understand what they're doing in cEDH, which, if you're sitting down with new people playing, then like they don't really have any idea what any deck does. So like that, that kind of eliminates that. But if you sit down with experienced people, they know like, okay, we probably should mulligan to like some early interaction, and the other thing that's kind of unfortunate for Rogsai is like, you're kind of a victim of seed order still. Like do you really want to like, imagine you end up like 3rd in seed or 4th in seed and your opponents drop down, like let's say an early fish, or somebody drops down like some fast rocks pretty early and, they hit their land drop, and maybe this person drops down like something pretty early, or you have some early stuff. Do you really want to go and like turn 1 wheel them into a brand new hand and like potentially let them, because like at this point you're going from, again, like you have your 7 cards versus your opponent's, like 21 cards that you've got to navigate through.
Right.
And then all of a sudden you wheel everybody and now you're dealing with not 21, but 42 cards that you've got to kind of navigate around. Let's say your wheel does pop off and you all of a sudden you wheel your opponents into a brand new hand. Well, if they didn't have any interaction in that first hand to deal with what you were doing, there's a pretty good likelihood they now have interaction to do what you're doing in your second hand. So, you know what I mean? Like, can you really push for a win at that point? Like, what do you know what I mean? Like, it's just tricky. Now, obviously, Rogside, turn 1, seat 1, that is insane.
It's hard to go up against.
That's what I'm saying. You have no mana really. You have to have a free spell or something. It can't be packed, you know?
Yeah.
I mean, what other free spell? I mean, what, like Force of Negation? Is that the one that's like, I always get it in Force of...
So Force of Negation, that'll be, you can only cast it for free during someone else's turn. Force of Will, you can do any time.
Well, Force of Will I know, and then Force of Negation. Which one is the one that's like if you have your commander out?
Fierce Guardianship.
Fierce, okay, cool. So it was, okay, so Force of Negation, so both of the forces, Force of Will, Force of Negation, those are the two that basically will save you in that instance, but like, what are you going to do? Pact, turn 0? Like,
I would,
you know what I mean? So like,
I'd maybe argue like Mental Misstep. I think
maybe,
that's a good one, and Mindbreak Trap. You know, like
Mindbreak is a good one. I forgot about.
Yeah,
Mindbreak,
like those are probably your biggest ones there.
But I don't know that Mental even saves you in that instance though, because like, I mean, it doesn't stop a wheel, and it
doesn't stop a will, but
no, it does stop like the rituals and stuff.
Yeah, like or like if
or no,
say they go to Infernal Plunge, or even drop a Soul Ring. Like if they did like or a Springleaf Drum or things like that, I think most players would see some of those pieces and go, I'm not going to waste a mental on that. But I think if Rogsai is trying to pop off right then and there, like you have to cut them off of those resources as soon as you can, because then that puts them back a turn or two. Like if they were trying to land Rog, maybe a Lotus Petal, cast a Soul Ring. Well, if you mental messed up that Soul Ring, it might take them off that wheel.
Yeah.
You know? So I don't know. I think you just kind of have to really, not only you as the player playing wrong side, but you at the table playing against it. You have to be really aware of what this deck is trying to do.
Yeah.
Because if you're not sure or you're not prepared for it, it's just going to pop off.
Yeah. Well, the way I kind of think of it is like everybody now, and this is like just silly, and I may not even throw this into the actual like episode, but it's like I think of everybody now as like, again, like very grindy. Like you have all these like snipers. Like everybody is just like they're waiting for their opportunity. Like, you know, they're laying low, they're doing what they need to do. And it's like you go and you look down your sight picture, and then Rogsai standing there with a fucking shotgun right in your face. Like, you know what I mean? Like you just have to kind of like it's gonna blast you. And if you can get through the initial blast and like you're good, then like obviously like you may take them out. But if you can't get through the initial blast,
but I think that brings up a good point though, because like if you think about it, you know, some of the deck construction, and I think ultimately that's what it kind of comes down to. Like if you're trying to go like as fast as you can, I don't know if all pilots are playing the Ley Line of Anticipation or like I've even tried that and like Reign of Filth in my build and like trying to make it as fast as possible. But like, you know, there are people that are coming off of the redundancy of having Necropotence and Necrodominance, you know, and maybe even taking Necrodominance out, subbing it for the One Ring. So, I mean, like if you think about in terms of that, you know, it even shows that this deck is trying to find ways to push into that later game by putting in the One Ring or slowing down on some of their pieces. But I think ultimately that game plan overall of like go as fast as possible is number one priority, you know, and like what you're saying there, as far as like, you know, everyone else is kind of sitting back and like waiting for something to happen, and Rogsai's not necessarily doing that. That's probably true to an extent, but I think the really good pilots of the deck are backing off a little bit, or at least they're understanding I need to tune the deck to be able to do this, because I'm going to always find myself in a situation where I'm either A, going to be the target of the table, or B, I'm not going to be able to go off by turn 2 or 1 or 2. So,
and again, I'll probably have to move this to like a different spot. I mean, it just doesn't work right now, but like I think that I can take a guess, obviously, at what's going to be the next couple of things, but obviously I don't want to like spoil anything and like ruin it. But I think the issue that like, so Grixis obviously is like, again, it's good at being like very aggressive. It can make a lot of mana, especially with Rog at the table. You know, you're getting immediate access to your free stuff. You're getting immediate access to like all this mana basically. But I do sometimes wonder, like, would it be better run as like, not necessarily like Rog go fast, but like almost like a more control E shell. Like you have all the mana to pop off whenever you need to pop off. So like, could you play it more control-y? Now, obviously, I feel like if you were I feel like the reason that like if you're playing in the mid range, you almost want to have white in your list, or you want to have a way to like not be casting spells. So like, which but I think that having white while playing into the mid range, like it's so pivotal because it literally gives you an opportunity to be like, oh, I'll just make it to where like nobody can interact with me.
Right.
Like I'm gonna cast Silence or Grand Abolisher or just whatever else, or like again playing around those counters. I think that even if you look at the way that some of these other lists are moving, they're playing around a lot of the counters that are really popular in the format. Whereas like ROG almost does like the opposite. Like that whole list, there's like 5 creatures total in that whole list. Right. Everything else is pretty much instants and sorceries. So like it plays right into the thing that like, I mean, again, there's a ton of counters rampant in the format, and I just feel like it's in a situation to where, I don't know. I think that we're going to slowly start to see this list continue to drop, if you want me to be honest. I think that eventually, I don't even know. Like, I don't want to give like a definitive answer. I would say that by like probably like summer of this year, I think it's like out of the top 5, in my opinion. I'm just going to that's my hot take. I don't know what will replace it. Probably a different ROG deck, maybe. Could even be Tivit, like what you thought.
I think it might be ROG Rayhan.
I love Rayhan. I do. Like, that would
good
be
Jund pile.
Jund pile? Just sans blue. Just get rid of the blue and add green. We'll just go like some weird devoted druid line.
Right, exactly.
But
I think that's going to be our best bet.
I don't know. Like I said, and again, I'm not trying to shit on the deck. Like I obviously understand that it's a good deck. I just like to talk my trash when I like to talk my trash. But I just don't know. I think that the deck relies way too much, again, on like luck. Well, like there's already an amount of luck in cEDH, but I think that it adds more of the element of luck to it. And honestly, like I think that people would just have more... I don't know, like, I'm trying to think of how I'm trying to say this. Like, it seems like a deck that looks like it would be encouraged for newer pilots to pick up because it's like, oh, it's simple, go fast. But I feel like you really need a good pilot to have that deck do well because there is a lot of, like, understanding what you could be staring at the table. Like, I see this deck, they probably have this. I see this, they probably have this. And like understanding how to play around these situations, when to time things. But to me, it just feels like a deck that adds even more luck to the equation than there needs to be. Because again, like you have to hope your wheels end up being good. And on top of that, you could wheel somebody else into something just amazing. I mean, it's like one of the only decks that's playing a shit ton of wheels. I mean, you really don't even see wheels in like a lot of these other decks. Like It just doesn't, because we don't want to refill our opponent's hand with just a fat grip of cards that they're then going to use against us. But ROG is like, nah, I'll run the whole wheel package. I don't even care. They can see 40 cards this game. Like, I'm fine. And it's just, I don't know, man. I just think that, again, like that's the best way for me to say it without like rambling. I think it adds even more luck into the equation than there needs to be. And so it can make it difficult for you to have like consistent top showings at tournaments. And even like Matthew from Lamore's Cards, like the guy that runs the channel, which everybody calls him Lamore, but it's his name's Matthew. Even him, he's talking about like how he's coming off of ROG side. He's actually on Plagon right now. Like that's what he's loving right now, man. And it's crazy because when you look at what we talked about, I think that like we thought that like Izzet and like Dimir and all these other like, blue X shells are better than, Simic. They seem like they would be in a better spot than Azorius, but apparently Azorius is doing pretty good right now.
I have yet to see how that deck plays.
Plagon?
Yeah.
Do you know what it does? Like
I know bits and pieces.
Yeah.
That might be for a different day.
Yeah. Yeah. Completely unrelated to that. It's basically just like it draws you cards equal to the number of creatures that have a higher toughness.
Yeah.
So you just play a lot of like flickery type spells, but you also run things like Displacer Kitten and the Teferi package and stuff like that, so that you can just continue to like flicker your Plagon. But if it gets going, because the games are going like more mid-rangey, there's times where like literally within one turn cycle, you'll rip 17 cards off the top of your deck.
Christ.
Problem is Azorius doesn't have a lot of great card options. So you see 17 cards, but like 12 of them are shit.
Yeah.
Yeah. So like, and no, nothing against Plagon. Like, obviously, it's clearly been like a pretty decent deck too. But like, man, I think that there's just something about. I don't know. Just go ahead.
All right. Well, like, I don't have many final thoughts on the Rogsai deck. I mean, you talked about luck. I think it's one of those decks where it's like takes a lot of the skill level. Ultimately, you're still just trying to play like a Thoracle combo in the breach lines throughout it. That's kind of the only thing we didn't talk about as far as like how the deck actually gets there. But it comes down to, I think it's a little bit of a mixture of both. Like, again, you have to have the luck based on like seeding, and then maybe even getting into that pod that there's not going to be a whole lot of interaction, because you see that sometimes even at the cEDH tables. And then being able to really understand and know what you need to do in any given situation to pilot that deck. So other than that, I'm good on Rogsai for today.
Yeah.
Number 4. This is my baby. This is my child. So we got Sisay Weatherlight Captain.
Absolutely. I told you it'd be in 4.
Yeah. So Sisay actually moved up on the list. So Rogsai was at number 4. Sisay was at 5. Now they've switched. So we got Sisay at number 4, our only 5-color deck now in the top 10. So Sisay, I have been playing over a year now. And so I've played a lot of different, well, I don't want to say variations of Sisay, but I've played, pre-ban, post-ban. I've tried the clam chowder route. I think the tutor chain is really solid. I know that a lot of the Sisay pilots within the Sisay Discord are, they do things with like survival of the fittest and birthing pod lines and things like that. I think this is a deck that has a lot of flexibility in the way you want to construct it, which I think is really good, and I think it's healthy for the format. Whereas something like Kenrith allows a lot more of the value stuff, but we talked about Najila last time, like you really want to go one way or another. Whereas Sisay, I think you can build it just about any way you want to. I think it would be a shame to not go with the route that's already built into the commander, though. That's just my personal opinion. And being able to, in the early games, being able to fire off a bunch of like dorks or rocks and try to hit those Wooburg colors as soon as you can. A lot of people don't, I think you made this comment earlier, like a lot of people don't really know how to play around this deck, or there are sometimes you're sitting at the table and you don't see the Sisay as a threat, and then they make one activation, and then before you know it, they're winning the game on top of someone else. And that's also the deck I've found the most success with being able to do that, as far as present like the instant speed wins or things like that when someone else is trying to win.
No. No, man, I think that this is one of the reasons why I put Sisay so high, is like, it is essentially, I don't even know how to say this. Like, I feel like if there was a way to play the list more control-y, like, and in reality, like I'm trying to think of even how to say this. Like if you played it, I've thought about this. Like I've even thought about actually putting Sisay together just for like shits and giggles, but playing it almost like it is like an Esper control shell with like the win line in there, simply for the fact of like, you can create way more mana because like you have access to all your green, dorks and everything else that are going to make a ton of mana. You get access to even more free spells, and you get access to like, better counters essentially than you do in just like in a regular Esper shell. But it's weird because like the list, actually I don't want to get to that just yet. I think that Sisay is a unique deck in my opinion, to where like it's a smart plan where it avoids all of the things that are common in cEDH that, like, again, people are constantly casting a ton of spells. So there's counters that run rampant all over the place. There's interaction. There's all these things that, like, again, like if you play creature heavy, you might run into a deck that's heavy on interaction. If you play, spell slinger heavy, you're going to run into a deck that is like very heavy on removal or like on counters. But let's just say you can kind of just time things right. And then like if she comes down and nobody has a response for her, even if they're like, oh, I'm going to remove her, you're like, well, I'll just put an activation on the stack and I'll just win. And I mean, so it has the ability to win at instant speed. So it's kind of even, it's almost like Tivit, but instant speed. Like I'm hit the button and I'm going to win basically. Because like, I mean, even Tivit, you got to count to 6. Like, Sisay, you really only got to count to 5. Like you get Wooburg and you're going, you know, the deck's jamming and it's going to do its thing. And like, I just think that it's a strong deck. And it's also, I think the reason that I like it so much is the fact that whenever you're ready to go for your win, like she's sitting there in the zone, like you don't have to go and like search for a tutor to go get your Thasas or search for a tutor to go get consult or worry about people having counters for your Thassa or your consult or like letting you exile your whole deck and then they stop you. It's like, I literally don't even know if there's a way once Sisay gets going, I don't know if I have a single thing in my deck to actually stop Sisay. Like I genuinely just don't think I do. Like even if I was like Angel's Grace, I don't think it's not going to stop it. Like you can just, as soon as the turn ends, you just keep doing your thing. You know what I mean? Like I just genuinely don't have a clue of like how you would even stop that deck once it's actually going. Whereas like, I mean, even like Thrasios, you can kind of, like the only thing that it's weak to, in my opinion, is obviously like your tutor stuff, but like opposition agent.
Right.
But like it's one card.
I would say the biggest weaknesses to the deck is, like as far as like a really hard counters to the deck, opposition agent and curse totem.
Yeah.
Being able to shut off the activated abilities, or like even you talked a few weeks ago on like the disruptor flute or
yeah, but I tried using that against you.
Yeah, you tried.
yeah.
But like, you know,
I tried that and Oppo.
Sisay is just such a weird deck to try to explain. And I know that you had just mentioned like wanting to kind of put it more within like an Esper shell. The thing with this deck, it fits more with an Avant shell. The predominant colors within it are green, white, and blue with like a splash of red and then there's black in it. But, you know, I think that, you know, that's what makes the deck so strong with that, especially the green, because you have access to all the dorks, Savala, Asika, Enduring Vitality in there. You know, I'm playing Ruby Daring Tracker in there as like a hasty dork already. You know, Tyvar being one of the key planeswalkers, I think, in the entire deck. You know, and I'm sure that I'm missing a few other ones within that too. But you know, that's what really gets the deck going is your creature base. And like you're talking about like being able to avoid certain things. Sisay's heavy creature combo type stuff, whether that's like the Deravia Meal, which is the main thing, and then you can kind of tutor into like either some people will do like the Urtai lines where they can, you know, continue to like counter and blow up people's stuff and force them to draw cards. Like there used to be a line that some pilots would do with like Forbidden Orchard where you continuously give people spirits and then you take Urtai and blow them all up and force draws everyone. You can like cannon flip into like an Orcish Bowmaster and continue that line. Like there's ways of playing this deck even without the commander out on the field at times. But I think that Sisay is just really unique. It's interesting. It is really difficult to interact with. Like you basically have to have something like a Strict Serenade or a Force of Will that like you're holding up because you're prepared for the Sisay to come down and you're going to counter and force the player in to keep casting Sisay. Because especially if you're on the tutor chains, that's what your main game plan is. You have to have that commander. And that's honestly like the drawback of the deck. You know, I've been playing like some other decks here recently for the past like month or so where the commanders are more the game plan, or not the game plan, the backup plan, right? I don't have to have them out at all times. Sisay, I typically don't even like casting until I'm ready to really go off. But, you know, she's very versatile. I don't think I've ever played a deck that like can present a win, get stopped, and then the rotation goes through, and then I'm presenting another win like right after that for almost like 3 turn cycles in a row. Like she's just really resilient. And that's the only thing I really feel like I have to say about her and just the uniqueness, like being able to play the Planeswalker combos and like the Mount Doom line, which is the instant speed win there. It's a deck that you can technically take advantage of the One Ring if you wanted to with that Dravi line and just keep drawing cards. Sometimes you have to. I've been forced in a situation where I'm drawing like nearly 20 cards in a turn cycle because I'm tapping down the One Ring trying to draw pieces for the interaction that's on board, whether that's like a Draenith or, sometimes Graph Diggers in a way, like if I'm kind of shut off from being able to do some of the Walker lines, Graph Diggers can kind of mess with me, but even Sissa gets around that. And that's a prominent stacks piece that's going around right now too because of the breach lines and things like that.
I think it'd be kind of cool to try and like sit down and like brew a list sometime. But like, I'm trying to think of how to like ask this question because again, like the deck way better than I do. Is there a way that you could almost go Sisay and like I know that there's a lot of cards in the deck that are there for the Sisay plan. Is there a way to like, I'm trying to think of how to ask this. Like, is there a way to cut that number down to like a much smaller package and then I guess like run more like counters, removal, things like that? And then I guess like you go really heavy into like, maybe like you have like two, I guess like lines or like maybe your line is like, you're going to go Emil Derevi type thing. And like, you're going to try and like, make the infinite mana stuff with things like that, or maybe you go like so super heavy into like the Planeswalker line or just whatever, and then like again you play more counters and like you play control, or like I'm just trying to think of how to ask like could you get more removal and counters in the deck to where it allows you to play even deeper into the mid-range plan. That way, like the moment you're truly like casting Sisay, it is like I've literally already can cast Sisay, plus I have the mana to go ahead and like start going activations and go off. Like, would there be a way to do that? Does that make sense? Like, cause could you play counters and like stuff so that way you're like making sure everybody else doesn't win. Like you can kind of let them all burn it out, but then like just kind of let them do their thing unless you absolutely need to stop stuff. But then and also play removal for like again like things like Draenith, Oppo, stuff like that. But then have it to where you're playing like really heavy mana production like Dorks, Rocks, things like that. And then like literally the moment Sisay comes down, it's like, okay, I'm going to start activating Sisay. And kind of during that time while Sisay's been in the zone, you've been getting legendary creatures as well, like things like, Ragavan and Kennen and like other legendaries like that. The way like she comes down and then boom, it's like, okay, boom, immediately Dihada. Okay, then boom, right after Dihada, we're going to go get Amanatu, and then we're going to go get Nika Bolas, and then we're going to go get the the Teferi's?
Oh, Teferi.
Yeah, and then it's so like you're just immediately able to like jam that line as soon as she comes down, or like what would you?
There's ways of doing it. I think it all comes down to the deck construction. Like if you're wanting to go faster as a Sisay pilot, I feel like there like a lot of people are on playing things like I think it's Chainer. I don't remember if it's Nightmare Adept or not. It's the Rakdos one that like if a creature would enter the battlefield from other than your hand, it gains haste. Mm-hmm. That's a card that I'm not on right now. Yeah. I think a lot of Sisay pilots have cut out Talion. And honestly, like one card I've actually put back in is Sakashima. I cut it whenever Dockside got banned, but I'm running Seedborn Muse, and this is kind of a big Seedborn Muse meta, so why not have a way to tutor out Seedborn Muse? You see what I'm saying? Like, if I can have Sisay out, and then I put an activation into someone else's turn, she's a 5/5, I can go get Sakashima. He comes into play as another Seedborn Muse. They're untapping, I'm untapping. We're jamming on someone else's turn probably at that point.
Yeah.
So, like, there's a lot of, again, it comes down to the deck construction. I think it depends on what lines you really want to play, and what cards you're okay with cutting. Mm-hmm. So, like, for example, like I said, I'm not on Talion. I'm not the biggest fan of the Marvenite Orith line. Mm-hmm. I think even some people are kind of getting off of that in a way. But I'm on like, I think 10 counterspell package at the moment. And that's not including Urtai, which is another tutorable counterspell in Sisay and kill spell to take care of some of those threats. I've cut, let's see, I'm on Court of Calling, but I cut out Eladamri's Call for the time being. I'd rather have it go straight on the battlefield if I'm trying to look for an answer or put something into play, things like that. That has been kind of a question that, going back to that idea of how can you make it more of a control build. That is something I've kind of been struggling with cEDH, and part of the reason why I've been hesitant to play it at, bigger events than just our local meta, because I would rather have something where I can kind of sit back a little bit more on the value engines and be able to occur resources that way and not have to focus on the commanders and be able to interact when I need to, versus I'm going to go all into this plan and try to jam it and make it work.
Well, and that's what I was essentially asking. Like, could you play... And when I said Esper Control, I was just using that as like the example of like how you see whenever I play, I'm not taking game actions. I will literally draw pass. And then maybe I get a free rock or I get a rock or something. Like I'll drop it and then I'll just be sitting there. And people are just so worried that I'm holding up like a ton of interaction. Like I've got kill spells, I've got counters, I've got whatever. And like I will never tap out ever. I'm very early, maybe if there's not like a Rogsai and I can drop like a wrist stick or something like that. I will not tap out. Like I always make sure I'm like, I've got mana open. I can interact here. If I do tap out, then I've got something free. Like, you know what I mean? Like I'm just trying to be responsible. Like, could you play almost like cEDH Control where it's like, again, you're just pumping, like your main game plan, I guess, is like you run a ton of counters to address the things at the table. And then you're running just like a ton of mana acceleration. So you're not even worried about like anything else besides like, obviously like if you have a value engine and stuff, you can throw those down too.
Right.
But you're just like, you're jamming. You're trying to get as much mana on the table as possible while being able to interact if absolutely need be. Like if it's not a point, like, and even what I mean by that is like not even stopping like value engines and stuff. Like you're only interacting like if you're absolutely going to lose the game. Like if you see Thassa Consult come down, then you're like, oh, I guess I got to do something.
Right. Or
like maybe somebody tries to drop a grand abolish. You're like, well, I guess I got to do something. But like other than that, you're not even thinking about cEDH until you're looking at the table and you're going, there's my cEDH mana, there's my Wooburg mana.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, and that makes sense. I think
or would that just be wrong to play it that way?
I don't think it's wrong. I think that at that point you're leaning more into like the clam chowder build. And you're going more of a 5-color good stuff, and you might keep a couple of the combos. Like you would probably want to keep the Derevia Mill line in there, and then
a Mill Dockside, yeah. I'm just kidding. Go ahead.
And well, one of the newer lines has been Jolly Balloon Man and I think Village Bellringer. Of course, you could probably do the same thing with like Saheeli and Felidar Guardian, but like go infinite creature tokens and go wide and swing out. That's been some cEDH Pilots gameplay, but I think that's more of the pod version of the deck. But I think to answer that, I think you go more into the clam chowder build where you're doing the Thassa stuff, you're doing the breach lines, like you're not doing as much of the actual cEDH plan, and it becomes more of the backup. That's where again, I'm gonna go back to that point I made earlier. cEDH, I think, is one of those decks you can build it however you want. Like even if the main game plan is not the walkers and the creature combos and things like that, you can still include some of that and be able to pop off and be successful with the deck, but you are taking out a lot of the synergies to fit. You're taking out a lot of the synergies of cEDH to fit a play style that you're more comfortable with.
That makes sense. I get what you're saying. I was just curious. Like I said, I'm not saying that that's the right way to play that deck either. I could be way off base, but I just sometimes wonder, man. Like this is something that I actually struggle with quite a bit. I do sometimes wonder because you do have a lot of brains going into all these decks all at once, but I feel like you see one good player top an event, and then it is like, well, that's how we build the deck now, and people will just almost never get crazy with play testing different stuff. Like they will play test stuff, but it's like, oh, we added in like 2 cards. Which that's a significant, it's a big change. Like but I'm like at the point even now where with Xur, I will take out 1 card and replace 1 card Like I'll just take this out, put this in, and I'm like, well, testing something new.
Right.
Because like that's just kind of like, it's accepted. Everybody's like, oh, this is the way we do it. I just wonder if it would be good for some of these decks to have like a big shake up and a big change and just see how they do there. And if they do ass, then like obviously just don't do that anymore.
Yeah.
But like I wish that there was, I don't know. I just sometimes wonder that.
Well, and maybe to add a little bit more to that, I think Sisei could be one of those decks that has the potential to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And it's because they're not going to stop printing legendaries.
Mm-hmm.
As more sets come out, like, yeah, Sisei might get like, I'm going to say 3 things this year, over the course of how many sets that we've already covered. Mm-hmm. But, there is always that potential for some cards to come in and out, like, there for a little bit, a lot of Sisei pilots were on Lavinia, but then some have kind of shifted over to the Bossum, from Assassin's Creed. I'm on Ruby, that's kind of fitting that spot because I want to go a little bit faster and bring the speed of Sisei back up. Then having a hasty dork is kind of nice too. They can swing for 3 buffed. I always forget what that card could do because I had the Japanese printing of it. But I do think Sisei is kind of one of those decks that if you want to try things new, like keep most of the same consistent game plan, but try things new. Maybe not so much on the Walker lines because they're not printing as many Planeswalkers now, but there's always going to be options, and I think that that's what keeps Sisei kind of at the top and flexible enough to be able to do that.
Could you do like a? Well, never mind. Just ignore me. I was just trying to think. I was just thinking of stuff, but I didn't know if like maybe there would be a way for you to just like just play like Thrasios, Kin, and infinite mana.
You can
shenanigans in there.
You probably could.
Right.
You could probably be able to tutor both of them out, and then if you have enough to tutor out like Tezzeret, and then be able to use his minus ability to get Basalt Monolith out, and then be able to go that way. I'm sure that you can. It might be a kind of a, I don't want to say cheaper way of doing it. Might be a little bit difficult because you'd have to make sure that you'd want another legendary on board. I think Tezzeret's CMC is like 4 or 5.
I think it's 3 in blue or something like that.
Yeah.
Something like that.
And so like, okay, so then that kind of adds the point of like, would you rather do that whenever you can also already go and get the lines with the other stuff that's going to win you? There.
Go ahead. Sorry.
I was just going to say, I think that's all it comes down to.
Yeah. Well, I think this is the only other thing that I have thought about in Sisei, and I will say this because I sometimes it's tricky because like sometimes I do get a little bit like frustrated even in like Xur. I'll be like, like I just drew the Necropotence, whenever I just cast Xur the previous turn, and then for my turn I draw then it's Necro, and I'm like, what the hell? But so I sometimes wonder with Sisei, like, it's one of those decks where it's weird, man, because like you want to play value engines on top of that, because like obviously drawing cards it's fantastic, but in that list you have to be a little bit careful because if you draw too many of your win cons, then you're a little bit like,
Yep.
So it's almost like, I don't know, it goes a little bit it goes a little bit against what cEDH really wants you to be doing, but it's still just so fucking good. Like being able to tutor chain. I just think it's such a good deck because like you can go for the win when it's there. You know what I mean? Like with stuff like, sometimes people don't even see the win coming. You know what I mean? There's times where you'll be like, oh, this is only like, I can only go get a 2-drop. And then I'll be like, oh, we're safe, guys. We're fine.
And then I'm getting Cultists of the Absolute and like buffing Sisei, and then during my upkeep, the sacrifice triggers like going off there. Yeah.
Or it'll be like, what was it? One time you had the what was it? The Bloom Tender or whatever, and then like you went and got like a 2-drop and made like a hasty version of it and tapped it, and then you had the mana to start fucking going off or something crazy. I don't remember what happened. It was something
I don't remember. Yeah. I've had so many games with Sisei. They all just kind of blur at the moment.
And I hate that we've spent so much time on this, but I mean, obviously we're going to have more to talk about this because it's one of the 2 main decks that we play. Yeah. You know what I mean? So like we're going to have a lot to say about this deck. So people will get over it, but or they won't.
And maybe that's something we just talk about. Again, kind of this is another deck where we kind of talk about it later, or hopefully soon we'll have more gameplay on the channel. You're probably going to see me play Sisei. You're probably going to see me fuck up a lot with Sisei. But
you might see me fuck up with Sisay.
you can play Sisay?
I'll try it.
Okay.
I've tried it before. I currently my record
you
is
tried mine once.
my record is 1-1 with Sisay. I'm 1 for 1. I'm the best Sisay pilot out there.
Oh my god.
100%.
This guy.
I'm just kidding.
But
Data.
Maybe that's even what we kind of talk about a little bit more whenever we do get into the gameplay, and whether it's me or you or whoever wants to play that deck, just maybe even going more over the lines like we've talked about, like with some of the ROG size stuff, and then maybe even some of these other decks we're about to talk about too.
Yeah, I think that'd be good.
Yeah. All right, moving on. You want to guess what our number 3 is?
Kennen.
Yeah. Yeah.
I had an idea of the next 3. I had an idea of what all of these were.
Fair enough. So yeah, Kennen Bonder Prodigy is our number 3. So our only 2-color that's in the top 5. Kennen I kind of have a love-hate relationship with, I feel like. And I think part of that is...
Josh.
No. Well, maybe. I think... This is one of those decks, and I mentioned it earlier when we were talking about the numbers and whether or not it comes down to being able to pilot the deck and popularity. I made the comment about Kennen earlier where I think this is one of the decks that have grown significantly in popularity, and it's a deck that I think, I'm not going to say it's really easy to pick up and learn, but I do feel like it's a deck that is capable of kind of piloting itself. And I think that is what not only makes it popular, it makes it successful, but I think that's where you see the really big differentiation between people that are just going in and they're playing and doing the Kennen plan versus the people that really know what the fuck they're doing with this color pile. And understand when they need to put activations on or exactly what they're trying to go for, what lines they're doing, things like that. For example, I saw it in a game the other day with our Kennen pilot that he's still playing Thassa's Oracle in it. And that can be a way of winning throughout the deck, be able to slam a Thassa's and then being able to somehow continue putting activations on and thin out the deck or just draw everything and then slam it. You could do that, but I feel like this deck has it's presented things with just simply doing a finale and swinging out, being able to play the Cephalid Coliseum lines where you're looping Cephalid Coliseum and forcing people to draw out their deck and you just win that way. This is a deck that I think has a lot of flexibility, a lot of versatility. The pilot really has to know what they're doing on it. Same thing that just like I said with ROG side, but I think this one more so in particular.
I don't know. Kennen is one of those decks where what you were just saying. I don't know why you would be running Thassa's in that deck. Not to hate on anybody.
Some people do.
I just don't understand why though. It doesn't make, to me, it just doesn't make sense. If you've already went and got everything out of your deck and in your hand, there are so many other ways that you could just win with that versus being Thassa's. But also, and again, nothing against that deck. Absolutely nothing against the deck. But it's just one of those situations where I'm trying to think of how to say this. I feel like even some of the people will literally take a list offline. They'll put it together. They'll go, okay, cool. These are the cards that they're playing. These are the cards I'm going to play. And then, it's got combos in it that they don't even know how to do. You know what I mean? The Cephalid loop. Most people have no idea even how that works. Or they're playing some of these cards and they don't even understand why the card's in the deck to begin with. Kennen is just... look, and again, I understand, you really like Kennen, so you want to play Kennen. And, that can be true for anything. I'm literally playing Zur. It's probably one of the less... good Esper, it's okay, and I really love the deck. I think it's fucking fantastic, but again, Tivit's just kind of better. It comes down and it immediately does something. Zur just sits there for a whole turn cycle and does nothing, and then literally Tivit's got a 2-card combo. It's him, and then you can get Time Save, and it's a win con in the zone. I've got to go and try to put together a necro line, hope my life total's big enough. If not, I've got to just go get a Ristic Study or a clone and just kind of keep playing in the mid game. Like, again, so like for any deck, like you can be like, why not do this? But Kennen is just really one of those decks where I'm like, why? Like, he's an infinite mana outlet in the zone, but you have access to to better infinite mana outlets in the zone. Like, you can put something like Thrasios, who literally doesn't need specific colors of mana in the zone. Like, you can just have generic mana. You can have, you have even Sisay. Like, yeah, it requires Wooburg, but like it's got instant speed. Just like boom, I win the game. With Kennen, it's like you need to have you can obviously like still make your infinite like colorless mana, but if you don't have access to the other color mana, and like cool, you've made a way to make infinite colorless mana, but you still don't have a way to like close the game out right now. You can put a couple activations on the stack. There's a chance to whiff and like just really hurt yourself. Whereas like something like Thrasios, you either get a land and so you're ramping yourself, or you get access to another card in your hand, which is a card draw. So like there's always that. It's just a deck that like I understand why people play it, because again, it's probably one of those pet decks. People just really enjoy it. And I don't think it's a bad deck. I'm not saying that at all. I just don't know why it over some of the other options. But again, I get it. Like people just really like the deck. So I understand that. But I think there's a lot more skill to that deck that is required than people actually think that there is. It's like
Probably.
They see a little 2-drop Simic guy and they're like, I like that. But it's like, there's a reason why only a few pilots actually win tournaments with the deck. And it's typically the same people. And it's because they've spent years playing the deck. They understand the deck very well and they know what they're doing. And then you have a lot of people that just really love the deck because they're like, oh, I like what it does. And I get to play big stompy creatures in cEDH, which is really cool. But even still, it's like, you got to know what you're doing with the deck. Yeah.
Well, and maybe, I don't know if this is off topic or not. I feel like Kennen is the only deck in our top 5 that kind of falls under that same category we talked about last time with Magda and Yuriko, in that this is a deck that, like, if you don't have the expenses to do, Trop and Gaia's Cradle and things like that, but you got a lot of big stompy creatures that you can swing out with, like, this is a deck that I think from a cost standpoint is something that's easy for either newer players or people trying to get into cEDH to get into, because you don't even have to play the really complicated lines in it. You don't have to do is it Mirror Box with Basalt and Trop or Breeding Pool. You don't have to do that. You don't have to do, the Cephalid, because that could be like if you wanted to. I've seen that combo as an instant speed line. Like the dude was doing it in response to, I think, Sheoldred triggers, something. He was responding like it would have killed him, and then he killed all of us at instant speed, like on other dude's turn. Like it was crazy. But like you don't have to do those lines. And I think that as far as popularity goes and from a budgeted standpoint, again, Kennen kind of falls in that category where you can get a lot of new players into it. But I think that's what creates such that distance and the either the skill gap or what we're seeing posted online, where you just made that comment on, you see the same few people topping with this deck over and over again, but everyone else is kind of spread out, So I think I want to believe that's another kind of factor that plays into this as well. I don't know though.
Well, and my bad, I didn't mean to.
No,
I was gonna say, and with most decks, I mean, you're gonna obviously see that. Like, there's good pilots are gonna do well. Like that's the whole thing of it. It's like good players are gonna play. They're gonna place higher up in tournaments, like because again they're good players. Whereas like most people are just kind of going to tournaments willy nilly, having fun, like they're playing their Friday night Magic and everything else, and like that's totally cool, man. Like I get it. And again, it's not like we're going to tournaments and just like wrecking house with every single time with decks and stuff either. So like I'm not bashing anybody for wanting to play that deck, but I just think that again, like purely from a like, is this the best deck? Is it a number 3 deck? I personally think that there are options like other decks that are better, but just the there's so many people playing it that, again, it's just naturally going to be high up. And I just think that the really good pilots carry a lot of the weight for the deck. Now, again, I don't think it's a bad deck because clearly, like, it still should be in the top 10, in my opinion. But, like, again, I just think that I just don't know that it should be number 3, but it is number 3. And that's,
Where do you feel like it should be then?
I mean, I think that, to me, okay, I'm just trying to say this in like a good way. I feel like generic good stuff decks are probably obviously going to do well because like anybody can pick it up and like understand, like they can get a good idea of like how to play it,
right,
and like do well with it. But I think that if Kennen just didn't have like the actual, what am I even trying to say here? I feel like if you took all 10 decks, like if you just took all of the top 10 decks and you took a good player and you said you need to go top a tournament with this deck, I feel like some of the stuff that is a little bit more like generic good stuff decks, those good players would consistently do better with that deck versus taking Kennen and like consistently having like top results with it.
Right.
Because again, like it's just kind of what I was saying with Rogside. You're adding more luck to it than there needs to be. You're adding more of like, let me make sure I don't whiff off of this Kennen flip. I'm going to throw all this mana into this and I may not get anything out of it.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like it's just, if I drop a Heuristic Study and somebody doesn't pay for it, I'm guaranteed to get a card. If I put an activation into Thrasios, I don't have to take the land if I don't want to. I can get a card if I can try to get a card, or I can just take the land. Like it's fine, At least I think that's right?
Yeah.
Yeah, because you scry one and then it's, draw.
You can either put the land into the play tapped or
draw. Yeah. So like again, same deal. And then, like Magda, for instance, like you can go grab whatever you want. Anything you want. If you put a Magna activation on the stack, you've got it. Go get whatever you want.
Right.
Sisse, go get whatever you want. As long as it meets our cost, go get whatever you want. You know what I mean? But you're just adding another element to the game that you have no control over. And I feel like it's a little bit hard to be consistent when luck is such a big factor for a deck, if that makes sense.
No, it makes sense, but I think that it's kind of an issue that we're going to see all around. Because we're playing a 100-card format.
Yeah.
98 to 99 cards in our deck, and it's all singleton. Mm-hmm. So we can only do so much to create that consistency versus if we were playing something like Modern or Standard or things like that, where you can have up to like 4 copies of each card. Imagine doing something like that in this. It'd be ridiculous.
Yeah, no, I agree with that.
You would get that consistency. You probably see this as the top deck having, Kennen being able to flip into like 2 Void Winnowers for no reason. You don't need 2, but then 4 Wandering Archaics. That'd be stupid. I don't think a player could get past that at that point.
I feel like I'm trying to think of how to say this because again, like I don't want people to just think that I'm like the grumpy old asshole that doesn't like any of these decks because I love Kennen. I would actually play Kennen. Like I've played Kennen before.
I wanted to play Kennen.
I have Kennen thrown together. Like right now, I could play Kennen right now if I wanted to. Like I think the deck is cool, and I actually will probably play it on the channel at some point. But what I essentially mean is like there are certain decks that I feel like in cEDH you have these things that you obviously should be doing. Like you should be ramping, you should be drawing cards. Like you want to have access to resources, so you should be ramping, you should be drawing cards. You should be doing things like that, if that makes sense. Like you should be taking game actions. But Kennen is one of those decks where you're playing so many cards in the deck that could potentially just be totally dead. Like completely dead. If you start drawing cards, you put a value engine down and then all of a sudden you draw and it's like, oh shit, I just drew a Wandering Archaic. And then you draw again and it's like, oh, it's a Void Winnower. And then you draw again and it's like, okay, now you've got like maybe something that's good. Like maybe you drew into like a good piece. It's definitely going to pick him up, which is hilarious. Yeah. Maybe we'll just let him be on the stream. Be in a video. Meow. But no, like, I think that
They're just gonna be like, where'd the cat come from?
Yeah, just out of nowhere. But I think that again with like Kennen, you're just adding. There's a lot of cards that are come on, bud. But no, like I think even with like Kennen, like I don't know, you just trying to think of how to say this. Like, and again, I'm sorry that I'm stumbling so hard on how to say this, but like, there's just so many dead cards in the deck. Like, if they're in your hand and you don't have anything to do with them, like you cannot, like they're just dead. Like, if I'm playing whatever, Esper Shell plus something, and I draw into like Dothy, I can still throw Dothy down. And even if it's not stopping the Underworld Breach or doing anything like that, like people are casting stuff. There's cards going to the graveyard. I can always use it to like steal somebody's counter. I can use it to steal something else.
Yeah.
If I draw into a Necropotence, like the card's bananas. Like I can just rip a ton of cards, draw into Ristic Studies. I draw into some lands. I'm still ramping, I draw into counters. Like, okay, cool. I can keep other people from winning the game. Draw into some removal. Like your deck is full of good generic cards that are just, they're good. They're just good generic cards. So that way you can then, you always have something to do. Whereas like, again, with Kennen, you play so many dead cards, just like in like some of these other lists that are very heavy on their commander, you just have so many dead cards that like they just kind of sit in your hand and they literally do nothing for you at that point. And it's tough. Like what you want to be doing is not having them in your hand so that you can do activations and just get them straight to the field so that they can't get countered.
Kind of like Sisay.
And that's what I meant. Like Sisay has that one little element where it kind of goes against what's something that you want to be doing in cEDH. Like you don't want to draw into your win conditions because you don't want to be casting them.
Right.
But you still want to draw cards in cEDH. So like, I think essentially what I'm trying to say is I think that's why it's not even necessarily I don't think Kennen should be in third. I just don't ever think we'll see Kennen be able to beat the top two decks that I think are coming up because of the fact that they are generically good cards. No matter what card you are drawing in your hand, it is typically going to be a generically good card. Whereas like some of these other decks that are down the list farther, they have cards in them that are just dead.
Right. Well, kind of going into that then, what do you think, what do you think our number 2 is?
What do I think or what do I know?
What do you know our number 2 is?
I wish that number 2 was Tim the Thras and not Tim the Crom, but I know that it's Tim the Crom because more people are playing Tim the Thras.
And it's interesting because, when we were together last week and we were recording, Blue Farm was number 1. TNT was second.
Was it really?
So this is another one that has moved down the list and is now in second place. And you kind of talked about it a little bit earlier whenever we were covering Rogsai, of like, why not lean a little bit more into control or a little bit more into that mid-range game plan, splash the white and be able to protect the win even more with the same win cons.
That's essentially what Blue Farm is. It is literally just Rogsai with white. That's
right.
That's really what it is. You're playing a Grixis list that wins pretty similarly, almost the exact same way that the other list does, but you then now have more protection. Why would you want to? Go ahead. Sorry.
I was gonna say, yeah, you're right in saying it offers like a little bit more of the protection there. Like, I feel like this card is somewhat underrated, but I feel like one of the biggest pickups you get in white is Savine's Reclamation, because then you just go straight for, if you're able to cast Intuition and you get Underworld Breach, Lion's Eye Diamond, and Savine's Reclamation, and whatever combination that you're given, if you are able to present a protected win going into your turn, and like say if you have a Ranger Captain or if you have a Grand Abolisher are already on the field and they don't get rid of it and you do that on someone's instep, it's game over at that point, basically, because you can assemble that Breach and LED, whether they give you the Savines or, whatever they give you, whatever option. So like that's a huge include. The Ranger Captain, the Grand Abolisher, like I just said there, like Timna still being good in the command zone, being able to draw the cards. Like I don't know if all decks are on Smothering Tithe still or not. Having access to certain removal pieces like Swords to Plowshares or sometimes even Path to Exile. I see a lot of these decks kind of making a move over to like things like Delny in the 99 too, just to be able to get multiple triggers off the Timna or, some of the other creatures that are in the deck. I don't think this deck has ever truly been on anything like the Teferi line, like how we were talking about a little bit earlier with like Tivit and things like that at times. But yeah, like you have access to all these different pieces that I think make it to where the deck just kind of functions better and way more consistent.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree. And the reason that I think that this deck technically, again, I think that Timna Thrasios is going to be doing better because more people are going to play it. I mean, it's with anything. The more representation of something you have, I feel like naturally you're just going to do better. Right. Because again, like it just is what it is. I mean, I'm not saying that Timna Thrasios is bad. I think that deck's fantastic, But, and again, even though Thrasios gives you the option of having here's an infinite mana sink in the command zone, I can just win that way if I absolutely want to. I think that the benefit of something like Timnacrom is that you don't even have to have the commanders. The deck is just generically good, and the commanders are just there to help you find more ways to get to it.
Right.
Now, on the counter side of that, yes, you can do the same thing with like Thrasios. Like you can put activations into it to continue to like find cards that you need. But I almost feel like, I don't know. I feel like every single time that I've seen somebody play Timna Thrasios, I feel like they struggle to either struggle. Hang on, sorry. I feel like every time I see somebody play Timna Thrasios, it's like, yeah, you're drawing a lot of cards, but it's almost like they struggle to actually like close the game out. And even if they do close the game out, or let's say they do go for a win, like they go for a way to close the game out, you're going so heavy into like infinite mana Thrasios plan. Still a great way to do that. Like, I mean, it's fantastic, but you can very easily just get completely like blown out. I mean, we saw it the other day. Like they kept a hand that was very like Thrasios heavy plan.
Right.
And once it was gone, they had nothing else to do the whole game. They were shut out.
Right.
Because they kept that as like, oh, this is going to be the win right here, baby. This is it. And it just didn't pan out,
Right.
Like, again, that can happen to anybody, any deck. But I just think that, again, like I think that Timnacrom, generic, good, sans green shell is just like, I mean, it's really strong, man. It was taken, I mean, it was killing it for so long.
Right.
And I think the only reason that we're seeing more Timna Thrasios now is because people just want to play something that's different, and it's now had an opportunity to do pretty good. But I just refuse to believe that we automatically got like Hazels and then all of a sudden the deck just became the best deck in the world. Like, I just don't. I mean, we've had the Devoted Druid and like the other lines for forever and everything else. Like, I don't think that one card. Well, I mean, obviously we got like Enduring Vitality too. So, but the deck was not doing that well before the bans happened.
Yeah.
And now it's like killing it. So I don't know what happened out of nowhere to just all of a sudden make this deck like explode into like, oh, it's now the new best thing. I just genuinely think that it probably could have at least been in the top 3 still if people were playing it back then.
Yeah.
But it's kind of like, oh, like Flash Hulk meta was pretty heavy. People got tired of playing it, so they came off of it. And then they were like, okay, Timnacrom was now the new best thing. Well, then now the meta shifted up, and they were like, well, I'm tired of playing Timnacrom. And then they went back to Timna Thras, and now it's the best thing again.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Well, and so maybe to, in a way, kind of answer some of that, but also like see why I think that it's in the second spot. And I'm not gonna lie, I kind of hope it stays at the second spot because I'm hoping that TNT stays at the top throughout the year for whatever I made the prediction. At least my top 3 are good right now. But I think one, red is arguably the weakest color in the format right now. I think that even though in blue form, obviously, like the red's good, it's mostly that Esper Shell plus red. And the red cards you're running, like sometimes the wheel effects, you're running Underworld Breach, the 2 counter spells, Pyroblast and Red Elemental Blast. some decks are running like the Professional Facebreaker now. Red got weaker whenever the bans happened. And so while, Blue Farm might not necessarily been a deck that had to go heavy into a Dockside game plan, Dockside getting hit and weakening red overall, I think is what kind of ticks this deck down a little bit. And then the fact that, and I'll talk about this a little bit more when we get to the number 1 TNT, but I think that since the combo lines in this deck are so much easier to interact with, because, if someone is trying to go for, a breach line, and like you can either counter it, you can Besaju it, you can silence them, you can, if they're brain freezing themselves and, they continue to target themselves, but they might have one of the combo pieces, like if Thos is in the graveyard. Okay, well, I've got Agatha's and exile it, and then you're going to have to present the loop to mill everyone else, which is a little bit more difficult. But I think red right now is a little bit more easier to interact with than what green provides. And I think that that's probably part of the reason why we see it in second here. I don't know. That was a deck that I played for a few months. And even though I'm playing Sisai now, I felt like another thing with Blue Farm, it kind of falls in that category we talked about with Rogsai and Kennen, where you have to have the ability to pilot that deck. Even though it's a good stuff pile, you really have to know what you're doing and being able to interact at the right times. Where here recently I played TNT, I feel like there are moments I can set back, be reactive, but because Thrasios is there, I can continue to progress my game state. And it allows me for a little bit more flexibility to kind of pivot and do what I need to keep progressing. Whereas with Blue Farm, whenever I played it at the time, and this was pre-ban, I just felt like there's something missing here. Either I'm not understanding it, or I feel like I'm just not doing the thing I'm supposed to, or what. So even though it's a good color pile, I also think that that's something that hits it too. People look at it and go, oh, this is the best deck in the format. And now they try to pick it up and they're like, oh shit, I still don't understand what I'm doing with it.
Yeah. I mean, I guess I get that. I don't know, man. I just think that, like I said, I just think that there's less. I feel like there are less overall dead cards in Blue Farm than there are in like Timnathras. I got fucked up there because I was like, I was like Timna something. Yeah.
Timnarog.
Timnarog. Why don't you just put them together and see how that does? Just Mardu.
Oh, just you wait.
Yeah. You gonna do that?
We might. Let's see what happens with that deck. I got some brews going.
Let's just play Jessica Thrasios. But no, I just think that I don't know, man. Like I said, I just think I'm not saying that the deck is bad by any stretch of the imagination. I think that it's totally fine. I just think that I think that both of those decks are. I think they both deserve to be in 1 and 2 for sure. Like again, I just think that Timnathras is one of those lists where there's a lot of combos. So I guess it's probably more resilient to like I'm gonna bounce back again and again and again and again and again because like you can go the Devoted Druid line, and if it gets shut down, then you have Hazels to try and go, and then there's still Kennen Basalt, and then there's like, but again, it's really just like it's a deck full of combos, whereas like you may have one piece of the combo and then you may be missing the other thing, whereas like I feel like in like Blue Farm. The only dead card really is like Thassa. I mean, even if you cannot go for Underworld Breach right then and there, you can still use it to like get a little bit of value in it. Like Savines is still a card that you could technically use to like do something with. Right. I'm not saying that it's great. Intuition is kind of like just one card like, hey, let's set us up for the win right now. You have Brain Freeze, like you can still use it to kind of interact with people. Like if they top deck tutor and you just want to like go ahead and fire it off to like fuck up somebody that's trying to like do Kennen flips or something like,
and then be able to get it back later. While
yes,
going through your lines.
Yeah. Or if you just want to mill yourself out some because you have Underworld Breach in hand and you're like, oh, I'm just gonna, like I'll just wait, like I'll fire it off in the end step because somebody cast a bunch of spells, and then I'll do Underworld Breach on my turn, or,
right?
You know what I mean? And then again, you still have access to red. You can go fast like the Rog, which we were talking about is clearly like a problem anyway. You can go fast like Rog. You can take it slow, and you can play into like that mid game, like the mid range game, but you don't have to rely so much on the commanders. Like now, obviously, like you're still kind of weak to a lot of the same stuff, but I just think it plays less dead cards.
Yeah.
And so, but again, maybe that's not necessarily a good thing. Like maybe having access to the win right in the zone, plus you have generic like good card draw stuff in the zone, and you have stuff to do with the excess mana that you don't necessarily have anything to do with in something like Blue Farm. Like maybe that is better, but I don't know. I just think that maybe I just fucking hate Thrasios. I don't hate Thrasios, but I don't. I really don't. And I'm not like I don't love Blue Farm either, but I just think that it is better than.
Yeah. Well, seeing as though we're kind of talking about both of them there, obviously currently standing TNT is at the number one spot.
Yeah.
But like, I do think they're kind of interchangeable right now.
What are the conversion rates on them?
Conversion rates on these two in particular.
Yeah.
They aren't even at the top right now. There's Catilda is number one based on what we have it set as. Let me do at least 20 entries.
So it changed as we were doing the video. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, exactly.
They're not
okay. If I change it to just 20 plus entries, Blue Farm has a conversion rate of 43.27.
Okay.
With 74 top cuts. And TNT has a conversion rate of 33.9 with 59 top cuts.
So which one was the top one? The one with the 40?
So actually, Blue Farm is number one, and then it's Thyam, Kenrith, TNT.
As far as conversion goes?
Yeah, as far as conversion goes, and that's within the past month.
Yeah.
With at least 20 plus entries.
Okay. And how many entries did you say for Blue Farm?
Entries or the conversion rate?
Entries.
It just had 74 cuts.
Oh, 74 top cuts.
Yeah.
Versus okay.
That's at least showing that the conversion of Blue Farm is better than TNT. Now, obviously, like we did most of this based on like popularity and things like that. I think if we were to set it based on the past 3 months, but again, I think that both of them are interchangeable in this 1 and 2 spot. Mm-hmm. I think that this is just, it's got to be the year for Tymna. And again, you brought up a good point earlier of like, this deck fell off and then like it's had this massive resurgence. Like since then, well, I mean, a lot of people, and this was my first cEDH deck, it was not TNT, I played Atraxa. So why would you not play Atraxa at the time of pre-ban when you have Jeweled Lotus and you have Crypt and you're playing a bunch of clone effects in the deck already to copy a Dockside? That was kind of, I think, the argument there for a while on why would you play Tymna Thrasios, something that is slower than Atraxa, in the same color pile. But now, I mean, Atraxa, I think, is still kind of performing well at times, but I think that the state of the meta, TNT just outperforms it. Yeah. And that being said, I think green is a little bit stronger right now, kind of for the exact reasons why I said red was a little bit weaker. Like, obviously, Bowmasters hurts, but the deck also plays Bowmasters, and you were talking about, like, just the good cards that Blue Farm plays. Like, why not go that route? Again, I'm going to kind of fall back on that. These combos within it are a little bit easier to interact with, right? So in TNT, a lot of it's creature based. It's a lot harder to interact with. Even in my version of TNT, I'm still playing the Derevia Mill line in it. I've heard other channels talk about that being like a European style of playing the deck. I don't know if that's true or not, but I haven't seen a lot of pilots within the US play that line within it. I play it because I really like it in Sisse and it's strong. But creature combo there. You have, obviously, the Devoted Druid line. And you could do Survival of the Fittest, pitch it, get Hazels, pretty much win on the spot there. It's a little bit safer than doing the Swift Reconfiguration or Machine God's Effigy. But again, you're still doing a creature-based line to generate what you need to do. Mm-hmm. Whereas, there's a lot of more counter magic in the format that hits non-creature spells, and I think that's what gets blue farm at times.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I agree with that. Well, I think I don't know how to say this. Like, I think that the benefit that something like... Sorry.
Did I bore you?
No. I got like midway through the sentence and about died. Just a lack of oxygen due to the being stopped up. But no, I think that I honestly think that like with blue form, you still have the Rog's High plan of like you can win early, which is huge. Again, probably not smart, but it's there. And then it is a mid-range-ish list, but like you can win early in the mid-range. Whereas something like TNT, it's winning, I feel like, later in the mid-range, if that makes sense. Like, now it can win early too, but like I don't feel like it can win as early as like a Rogsai or like something like Blue Farm. But it can still win kind of early, or it's like way grinding into the mid-range, like into the mid-game or late game. Like it's... You know what I mean? Like it's to the point to where like you've just had so much mana chilling on board and like people just haven't closed out the game yet. And you've just sunk so many Thrasios activations that like your hand is just fat full of cards and you got the Seedborn down and you're like, I'm just cruising here, but I don't know. I just think the card quality, I guess card quality, like you said, red's probably not as good as green right now, but I just don't know what, like, I don't know. I think red just gives you that quick acceleration that you have it there to like go quick and like just jam it. Whereas like green, your mana kind of sits around a little bit longer, right. Or it sits around longer, not just a little bit longer, unless there's a Bowmaster on field, then it may not be around for long. But you know what I mean? I don't know. I just think that, I don't even know what I'm trying to say. I just think that blue form's better. No,
fuck green.
I don't like green. Yeah. I hate green.
Well,
this is a smear campaign for green. Is
fair enough. You just hate on green and Yuriko all day.
What it is I hate 2-drops. Yeah. I hate Yuriko, I hate Magda, I hate Thrasios.
Oh my god. And Kennen.
Fuck them. All I like 6 drops. 10. No,
oh my goodness.
There's your intro. I think I just ate 2 drops. Yeah.
Oh. Well, I mean, no, we kind of got on. I don't even know what we got on just then. Like we got on this mix of our 1 and 2 spot going back and forth. But ultimately, I don't think there's like a definitive answer. And, I think that they will continue to kind of go back and forth in that slot. I think we'll probably see a pretty good shift in the middle of what we've talked about. Not just today, but what we did in last week too, covering the bottom half of our top 10. I don't know. I think again, we're still in this awkward spot where, okay, these decks are really solidified, but there's a lot of potential here. And then everything else just kind of falls underneath that. And so we'll see what happens over time.
Yeah. I mean, I agree.
So
like I said, I don't know. I'm just curious to see if we eventually get a meta that is not a Tymna meta. Like if they just completely nuke Tymna out of existence, then what happens? Do you think actually, that's a good question. Actually, I'm going to ask you that question. If they nuke Tymna out of existence, do you think Kennen now becomes the best? Like, would it become the most popular or best deck? Or do you think all of the blue farm pilots jump to something like Rogsai and then...
I think you would see more... shit, I might say Sisei's number 1 at that point. Yeah, but slightly edging out Kennen. Yeah. Probably Rog Thras would be my guess. I don't think anyone would play Crom ever again. I don't see a reason in doing that.
You don't play like Crom Rayhan?
No, because I would rather play Thras Vile Smasher if I'm going to do the same color combination.
So, I just like the name of the deck, Crayhan.
So I don't know if they took out Tymna, I'd be kind of sad, but I think it would be our biggest meta shakeup if they did that. And I don't even want to try to use my brain power to think about where everything would fall into place at that point.
That's fair. So I do find it interesting now that you think about it, like both Tymna, Thrasios, and Rog all hold 2 of the top 10 spots with like Rog Thras, Rog Sai, Tymna Thras, and Tymna Crom. Yeah, I had to think about it.
Well, more than 2, that's 4.
Well, no, I mean like each of them have 2 spots.
Oh, okay.
Like Rog has Rog Sai and Rog Thras. Thras has...
I know we're in the South, but I could do math.
Yeah, Thras, or just 2 guys from Kentucky.
Oh, you're going to milk that as much as you can.
No. Well, somebody commented on it. Yeah, they were like, that about fucking killed me.
I mean, I think that covers our top 10 pretty well. And, I think, like we're kind of saying here at the last bit, going back and forth on what our first and second place are. But I'm actually looking forward to see how the rest of the year turns out and where, maybe by the time we're doing this next year, hopefully seeing where things have moved, hopefully we'll get some announcements pretty soon on like what's to come or, the brackets, bans, unbans, things like that, because I'm sure that's going to make a big shift if they make any changes there. Mm-hmm. So yeah, on that, you have anything else for today?
No, I guess the only way we're going to know what decks do the best is if you go play some cEDH.